So this is a very, very warm welcome to this press briefing today on the ESA Agenda 2025. This is a very warm welcome to the journalists with us here in this online press room. I would like to give the word now to Josef Aschbacher, ESA Director General, who will present to us the ESA Agenda 2025. This will take approximately 15 minutes. After that, all journalists will be able to ask questions. You will be able to do so by raising your hand on the right side or putting your questions in the Q&A field that you find on the top right of your screen. Josef, the floor is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Ninja. Let me just make sure that everyone hears it because we had a sound issue before. Can you hear me well? Yep, good. Okay, so welcome everyone, and thank you for participating at this short press briefing. So today's topic is ESA Agenda 2025, and I assume you have seen the document, so you know its content, but I will still say a few words what the highlights are and what the main issues of the document are, which I would like to highlight. But maybe before I do that, I have a few slides which I've prepared to go through the content. But before I do that, maybe just a few words on what the document is about, what its purpose is, how we created it, and what its intention is. So first, as you all know, I have started the new job as the DG of ESA on the 1st of March. And before that, I was really trying to make sure that on the 1st of March, I have a document on the table, which I would like to present to my member states and to the ESA staff and contractors, where I can lay out the vision and my intention of what the proposal is, how to move ESA forward in the next couple of years. So I prepared with a small team, but also quite a bit of my own work, the document called ESA Agenda 2025. And on the 1st of March, it was sent in a draft version to the member states of ESA, the heads of delegations, and to the ESA staff and contractors. I introduced it to my workforce in a televised video conference and left then the opportunity to comment also on a forum. So there was quite an intense consultation process ongoing before the publication of the document, but also between the first draft and the final version. Of course, also including with the European Commission, explained the content in detail, but also made sure that at least the key elements are well understood, and the European Commission, of course, being a key partner in space in Europe, but also I consulted other stakeholders like industry or some other people. So why I'm saying all this is just to underline that this is a document that is not only my own document of Josef Aschbacher, but really an inclusive document that gives the view at least cross-checked and discussed with quite a number of stakeholders, because it is clear that the vision of ESA has to be the vision of all its workforce and the member states collectively. The objective, obviously, is to stabilize the vision for ESA for the next couple of years, also in my new job as Director General of ESA, and to communicate its content to the wider stakeholders, to you, the press, and I'm very happy that we have today this opportunity, but also to other people interested in what ESA is doing. The document itself, as you have seen, is short, 15 pages plus 2 pages of introduction, and it really is meant to be well and easily readable, not very technical, but really for also the general public, politicians, in order to really understand a bit the higher level vision of ESA. Maybe we can go into the slides just to show you a couple of slides on its content, but I don't want to dwell too much on the slides themselves, because I do assume that you have read it very carefully, and I would rather spend the time in answering questions on your side, which you may have. The next slide, yes, this slide shows just ESA, recalling some of the core elements of ESA, who ESA is, but I don't need to explain that. You all know ESA very well, the size, some facts, as you know them through the various communications and elements, but this is more for reference. But the next slide then starts explaining the document. And what you see here in the headline, it says the year is 2035. And this may be an unusual way of starting a vision document for the next 4 years. but it is, for me at least, important to have an imagination of what might happen or what might be the situation in 2035, and what is the programs and the elements that ESA needs to focus on in order to reach this ambition of 2035. So the first page and a half are more fictional story between two persons. One is an astronaut called Aurora. She is in this story flying to the moon on her fifth mission. She was also accepted as the astronaut on the next mission to Phobos, Phobos being a moon around Mars, as you know. And she communicates after she takes off from Earth and goes into space. She communicates with her best friend, who is on ground on planet Earth, and calls him. His name is Leo, and asks him and chit-chats a bit with him on the most recent things of what's happening. But this first 1.5 pages also describe a bit where Europe might be in 2035. Of course, this is all a bit imaginary, it's a bit fictitious, as I mentioned, but it does highlight that Europe could have been on the moon by then, might be on its way to Mars, may have mapped exoplanets, a handful of them with Earth-like atmospheres, is just about to launch a gravitational wave interferometry mission in order to see what Einstein was expecting 130 years earlier in his theories. But also Europe may have created digital twins to monitor the implementation of the Paris Agreement and really create a twin of the Earth with what-if scenarios in communication, in navigation, and other disciplines. Lots of progress must have been made by 2035. So the next slide brings us back to reality. That means to today's situation. So we're back in the year 2021. And you only see here three areas highlighted: the United States of America, China, and Europe. And this has no text on it, but apart from the headline, but it is meant to highlight where and what space is doing in these different regions on the world. The United States, as you all know, is very active and on promoting and using space for their national policies in a very significant way. Of course, the Space Force was created in 2019 and is now gearing up. NASA has got an increased budget. On the commercial side, SpaceX, Blue Origin, and other companies in Silicon Valley are very active in promoting and putting private funds into space. So a very dynamic scene is developing in the United States. In China, quite different, but also very significant achievements in space. As you know, they've landed on the backside of the moon. Sample is being brought back from the moon by a Chinese spacecraft. Mars robot is about to land very soon. Space station is being built up. A navigation system is in place. In Earth observation, the Gaofen satellites are being launched. Now there are 12 series of them, which are in a way doing similar things than Copernicus, but with double the number of satellites in developing in almost half of the time. So very active, very strong space program, because China has declared space as a priority of its country in order to reach superpower status, especially towards the 100th anniversary of the Chinese Revolution. And then we see Europe in the middle. Europe, of course, we all know, is very active in space, has a lot of excellence in many domains, has leadership in some domains, but Europe has to compare itself with the rest of the world. The spending of European space, as you know, is about 1/5 of that in the United States. China is a bit more difficult to give figures, but in other words, Europe, despite a similar economy, despite a similar political standing in the world, is spending a bit less in space, but has quite a lot of significant and important achievements to show. The next slide then really goes into the agenda 2025, and especially what is the content of the paper and what it focuses on. This is only the headline slide, which shows that I'm looking at two time frames. One is 2035 plus, so what is needed in 10 years, 15 years from today. And the second part is looking at the immediate future, the next 4 years until 2025, and what are the priorities which, at least in Agenda 2025, are highlighted as those elements we have to tackle, we'd say, right away with a lot of energy. The next slide then really goes to the medium to longer term vision, 2035 plus, and it shows that there is an important aspect of, as I mentioned before, you have to compare Europe with the other places in the world. Of course, I did not mention Russia or Japan or India or many other countries which have also very significant space activities. But Europe, in my opinion, needs to have a serious debate on where Europe wants to be in the next 10 to 15 years in terms of its economic value and impact of space for its daily life, as a strategic element for its citizens, but also as a space being an element of unifying a country, unifying Europe, but also bringing new energy, new enthusiasm, new inspiration through new space programs, which of course are very important also to encourage people and to bring new spirits into Europe. So what I'm proposing is that we are launching this debate at higher level. There are several steps which are described in detail in the Agenda 2025. But some of the important milestones are the Space Summit, which I would like to have organized, obviously together with all the stakeholders which are necessary to have such a dialogue, which is in particular the politicians in the member states of ESA and the European Commission. Thierry Breton is certainly one of the partners with whom I would like to lead this dialogue, to organize a debate at high level, ideally at the level of heads of state, on a discussion of what are the ambitions, the priorities for Europe in space. And also hoping that this dialogue, which has a preparatory phase through a group of wise people, would lead to recommendations on new activities, new flagships, but also a new orientation of space in Europe. And we expect today that this is done. This summit is taking place in 2022. Of course, all the discussions need to be ongoing, especially on some of the elements of when, where, and how this is taking place. But this is all the starting point of this process. Then at the end of 2022, you have the ESA Ministerial Conference, which is the conference as planned in our usual cycle, November, most likely 2022, which will be the event where ESA is proposing programs for funding and then for implementation afterwards. So this is really something that is outlining more the process and to create a new awareness and a new ambition for space in Europe. As I said before, this is a task that goes beyond the capabilities of ESA. ESA is a technical body, it's not a political body. Therefore, ESA is ready and willing to support the political process with its capabilities, with our analysis, with our technical knowledge, to make sure that whatever discussion takes place and proposal can be made, they are well-founded, well elaborated from an engineering program management point of view. The next slide then goes a bit into the more immediate future. So having set the long-term ambition and the long-term goals, what does ESA now need to do in order to get there and to put things in place in the near future? And now you see a set of headlines or slides where I see ESA will need to focus in the next couple of years. So this slide here says strengthening ESA-EU relations. And this is something where certainly I see a need to work very closely. I'm working with the European Commission very well. I have been working with the European Commission, as you know, for many years in my previous function as Director of Earth Observations. I've actually worked in the European Commission as a staff some years ago, or many years ago. But I really believe that making advancements in space in Europe needs a very close, very intense, very strong partnership and working together between the institutions. That means the European Union and its institutions, the European Commission, European Parliament, and the Council of the European Union, and obviously ESA and its member states. There are obviously also other partners, but I think these are the two main ones we have to focus on. So apart from the immediate negotiation of the FFPA, which is ongoing right now, and we have restarted with fresh energy the negotiations, there are also some other aspects necessary in order to launch this process. In fact, one of the elements of this EU-ESA relationship, Fresh Start, was a joint letter which was signed by Commissioner Thierry Breton and myself. And I'm really grateful for this very strong signal also on the side of the Commission to reassure and reconfirm to the ministers that our institutions are working closely together, that we do need a fresh start in our cooperation, and that we have all the willingness and all the intention to do exactly that. The next slide goes into another aspect, a very important one, that everyone would understand its significance, which is commercialization. Commercialization obviously is a very wide terminology and very well understood in many domains. But if you look at the left part of this slide, you see that the investments which are made by the private sector in the US in white, and in Europe, I should say, this is only small and medium-sized enterprises and startups, but the figure is certainly much smaller. Regardless of what scale you take, the investments by private people in space in the US is much bigger than it is in Europe. And there, I think, is a need to do something. To do something, of course, is not so easy. First, there's a different culture in Europe. I've been seeing firsthand the way how companies work in Silicon Valley. It is very fascinating and it's quite inspiring. But you cannot transplant Silicon Valley to Europe. It's a very different mentality, a very different legal framework, different boundary conditions. Many things are quite different. But having said that, there are still things we can do in Europe to boost and to increase the commercial part. You need, or I would focus on three key elements. One is talent, access to money, and time or speed in order to implement decisions. I don't want to go too deep in all these elements, but just to say that talent, yes, we have a lot of talent in Europe, no shortage of it. In fact, so much that some of them leave Europe and go outside because they don't find opportunities in Europe. Second point, capital or access to funding. There are two ways of actions which I see. One is to create really the demand through, for example, anchor tenancy, anchor customer schemes, as it is done very successfully also in other countries and other parts of the world. On the other side, to create partnerships to help startups and companies, bigger companies with good ideas, to get access to venture capital funding, angel funding, or other commercial or private funding sources. And third, speed or time is certainly an element that is extremely important. Also, we as public institution, ESA, we need to speed up our processes. We need to be more responsive, more dynamic in order to be of relevance to these companies, especially in the so-called new space world, and make sure that we are an added value and not in the way of these companies. And there's a lot to be done, but it's not only speed, it's supporting disruptive innovation, to encourage risk-taking, and ESA can help in several aspects also to create this environment and to do and to work in this domain. I've done it in my previous job partially through the FEE Lab and the FEE Week, but there's many more aspects that are needed across the agency in all disciplines, and that's something I really would like to foster and to increase. And the next slide is focusing on safety and security, which is another domain where I believe we need to invest and to strengthen this activity. And if you click once more, then you see some of the elements of the content of safety and security, which are described a bit more in detail in the Agenda 2025, which is certainly relying on today's safety and security work, which we already do. We have a safety and security pillar, which has been subscribed and filled with content at the last ministerial. They are focusing, as you see here, on space weather, debris removal. There's a lot of space safety elements in space, which are listed on this part. And on the right-hand side, you see more the security part, using space infrastructure to ensure and enhance security on Earth through various means, Earth observation, telecommunication, navigation tools, and satellites, in order to help people in crisis, in risks, to do that. And this is quite an important aspect. On one side, ESA has all the capabilities from an R&D technology development point of view to work in this domain, but we are not doing as much as other countries or other companies are doing in the more security or defense related domain. So what I really would like to establish here is, apart from strengthening some of these elements on the pillar which exists already, to really have an analysis of capabilities and needs with the member states, because this is a process, of course, led by member states, and also very important also political dimension. Identifying gaps. It is clear that ESA will never do things that are done in a member state, so therefore we have to really identify complementary activities, and then through a dialogue or conference or individual consultations with the member states, identify elements for a proposal which can already be brought in the first element to the next ministerial in 2022. By the way, also some of the commercialization aspects, some constellations of smaller satellites are quite relevant also in this security domain. Then the next slide highlights a bit more in a vertical structure. So at the previous slide, some of the other elements that need immediate attention. And this is a bit different in nature than the previous slides I highlighted, which were all more of horizontal nature. These are vertical activities, programs in the directorates of ESA. You know that ESA is very strongly structured in program directorates with its individual programs. All of them are actually the ones that deliver success and deliver infrastructure and the elements that are required. But some of them are quite critical, of course, for ESA, but also beyond ESA, in the member states, for Europe, in order to make sure that space in Europe can succeed. I take only one of them or two of them to highlight the examples. One is launchers. Certainly on the launcher domain, the international competition is putting a lot of pressure on our launcher developments. Of course, in Europe, what we need to do is to have successful maiden flights of Vega C and Ariane 6 planned next year. Then we have the need for a sustainable exploitation program of both launcher families. And at the same time, or in parallel, we need to think of what launchers we need to develop afterwards with new technologies, probably also enforcing or encouraging a competition to a larger extent than we have seen it in the past through the invitation of also some commercial suppliers, smaller startups to develop their technologies. We have a program called Boost, which is doing exactly that, and which was described or subscribed already in the last ministerial. So these are really examples where we need to focus to bring Europe forward. Another example would be secure connectivity, a program of Commissioner Breton, already announced by him at the Space Week in January in Brussels. Certainly something where I would like to work very close with the Commission to establish a program, a constellation together. We have made investments also in ESA, quite significantly subscribed by our member states in the last ministerial. A lot of those are relevant for the secure connectivity initiative, which is promoted and proposed by Commissioner Breton. And I would certainly like to get a clear support and the contribution of our parts to this initiative, because I think this is the right way to go, and we need to work together to make this happen. And there are other domains in telecommunications or in Earth observation, in navigation, in exploration, in space science, which are needing some immediate attention. Then the next slide goes a bit into the internal cooking, if I may say, the internal transformation process of ESA as an agency, as an entity. And there, I don't want to go too deep because the external world may not be too interested of what we do in-house, but just to say that I would like to focus on the internal processes, on shortening cycles, cutting red tape, as you would call it, making faster decisions, being more dynamic, more responsive as an agency, with a lot of elements, of course, many of them having a digital nature to make sure that we are responsive and faster to respond to the challenges which I've outlined before. And the second element is our workforce. I would very much want to look at the workforce, the opportunity which we have on the table right now through the retirement wave. About 1/5 of our ESA workforce is retiring in the next 4.5 years. And this is an opportunity at the same time as it is a loss of a lot of expertise, but also an opportunity to get new domains, new disciplines on board, which we don't have yet at that extent we need. Artificial intelligence, quantum technology, just to mention two of them, where we need new expertise, but also I will make sure that we have a balanced and diverse workforce, balanced in terms of gender, diversity in terms of different countries, backgrounds, religions, and so on, to make sure that our workforce is young, dynamic, but also enthusiastic, and considers ESA the place to be in order to work for, which of course needs also investments on the educational part, that the STEM disciplines in the member states schooling system is supported with our activities. And this was one of the last slides, the very last one, or the previous second last one, I should say, just summarizes the documents which we have produced. Obviously, the document itself called ESA Agenda 2025, which you have received. It is available in English, French, and German. But we also have developed an executive summary, which is being made available. It was just finished last night, so therefore this morning. That's why it is very fresh. But certainly this is material that is at your disposal. More for internal consumption, I'm developing an implementation plan of what this vision means in reality and what actions we need to undertake. But this is a document for the workforce in-house in order to know and to group our next efforts. And with this, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Josef, and thank you to all those that were listening. I realized that in the very beginning we had a bit of a delay with the slides and with your voice. We were catching up on that later on. If there are any questions from the journalists on that one, let me know. We can, of course, go back to one or two of the slides if there is a need to do so. I see there is a question from Ben Upton, who is asking Josef if you can say a little bit more about the serious debate European heads of state should have about the continent's space strategy. If you want to answer that one, Josef.
Yeah, no, I was glad to answer. If I understood the question correctly, but please ask it again if I did not understand the intention of your question. But you said what the debate of the heads of state would be or should be in order to define Europe's ambition. So first of all, I really, as I outlined in the first part of the agenda presentation, I believe that Europe needs to seriously reflect where Europe wants to be in the next, say, 10 to 15 years in space. And I mentioned the examples of the US and China as comparable economies in terms of the size of the economic size of the economies, but also strategic importance of the various countries compared to Europe. And I do believe that Europe today will need a discussion on whether we should leave the investments in space at a relatively small scale, of course, realizing that the investments outside Europe are significant and are increasing. You see the milestones and the projects which are displayed by other countries on TV, on the news outlets, which with quite significant headlines, or whether Europe wants to catch up or increase its investments also with some flagship activities. Certainly on exploration, they are the most visible ones towards Moon and Mars, but also in many other domains, there is certainly a need to reflect on where Europe wants to be in the next decade. For me, space, and of course I would say this being the head of the European Space Agency, but for me space has many dimensions which serves its people. On one side, it serves the people to understand well the living environment, the planet, climate change, Green Deal is supported through space means, digitalization. All this is these are policies and priorities of Europe, where space plays a very important role to support the national or European policy priorities. On the other side, of course, space also is opening new frontiers of technology. is opening economic opportunities. Morgan Stanley is predicting that the space economy today is worth about $350 billion and is expected to grow in 2040 by up to 1 trillion, so by a factor of 3. And certainly also from an economic point of view, there's a lot of opportunities there, especially in the downstream sector. So yes, I think the heads of state are interested in this, in the potential of space for Europe, for their either national or European policies, whether they are driven by strategic considerations or economic considerations or other ones. And this is a dialogue I would like to raise through this Space Summit.
Thank you, Josef. I see there are a few more questions. I can also try to give you the word directly. I will start with you, Joshua. See if you can say something. Joshua, do you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Super, thank you for the question, Nina. So it's just about the European Commission proposal for a telecommunication constellation just discussed. In terms of timeline there, you hear EU officials talking a lot about the possibility to gain finance, maybe through ESA's membership to fund the project. Is that something that ESA might have on hand? You talked about various projects and funding envelopes that maybe were related to this project, or actually to finance such a scheme from the ESA side, you'd need to look to the next ministerial summit in 2022 to really clarify that question. It's just, my question is about schedule and timeline for this initiative.
Okay. No, thank you. It was about secure connectivity. Is that correct or more generic?
Yeah, exactly, about the connectivity constellation plan.
Yeah. No, thanks. So yes, to answer your question, it's both. On one side, we have subscriptions at the last ministerial, and the elements that are within the framework more or less of secure connectivity are close to 800-900 million in terms of subscriptions in our programs in the TIA directorate. Of course, this is all depending on decisions of the member states. But a good portion of this could be made available to the initiative that is being put together right now. As you know, it's under definition of the European Commission under the secure connectivity framework. So this is one part. Yes, this is a possible contribution which we are happy to provide. Second part, and this depends obviously on the ongoing studies. Yes, there could be opportunities for new funding coming up at the next ministerial at the end of 2022.
Thank you, Josef. Plenty of more questions here. Pascal Hansens, can you hear us?
Yes, more or less. I have to admit I have some connection issues, so sometimes I lost track. Sorry for that. Can you hear me well?
We hear you very well.
Yes.
Very well, yeah.
Great. Because I see Mr. Aschbacher disappearing from time to time. So first of all is one question on the FFPA. Are we very close to an agreement now? And you said you brought a fresh team, but my understanding is you also brought former negotiators from the ESA side. So is it a team with old elements and new elements, would you say? And new people, I wanted to say. And regarding the profile of the European Union, do you see it in the framework of the conference on the future of Europe, which could lead to changes in the treaty, also regarding space? Thank you.
Pascal, I think I heard the first part of your question, but not the second. The voice was interrupted, but maybe Nina, you got the second part? No? Okay, let me answer the first part, and then maybe for the second one, we need to find another way, either the chat or you repeat the question. On the first part, if I understood correctly, you were asking whether the team negotiating the FFPA is the same or whether there's any changes, and what the timing or what the progress is, in other words. So yes, we have restarted the negotiations. There's a new team in place. It is led on the ESA side by Eric Morel, with I would say people working now, and it's quite a lot of people in house. We have reinforced significantly the effort in house. Some 20 people roughly negotiating, I would say, almost day and night. Right now, as I speak, they are sitting in Brussels together with the colleagues of the European Commission and the European of EUSPA, the GSA today, but the future EUSPA, and negotiating the text of the FFPA. The main body text is certainly in the order of 150 plus pages, including the contributing agreements will be several other 100 pages added. So it's significant work they have to go through. They're doing it right now. And yes, I can confirm that we are making good progress, but we are in the midst of negotiations. And as always, you can only claim victory at the end of the day when everything is done. So yes, we have on both sides a very strong intention to move ahead swiftly. We hope to be ready with the agreement to get it approved on both sides by mid of this year. And the second question, Pascal, sorry, I did not understand, but maybe we could find a way to ask it again.
Will the summit be before or after?
Sorry, I hear Philippe.
I will try.
Philippe, you
Yes.
Sorry.
Philippe,
Can you hear me?
I heard the question, so yes, please go ahead again.
Sorry for that. I just wanted to see how do you want to articulate the Space Summit of 2022 with the conference on the future of Europe, to put it simply.
Yeah. Of course, these are two different events, but probably involving some of the same people. And certainly, this is part of the political process. I'm not an expert on summitology or comitology on how these summits fit together, but it is clear that the future of Europe, I do hope, is also having space on the agenda. And certainly, the Space Summit is focusing on space elements only. So yes, they are time-wise interleaving the space. Sorry, the summit on future of Europe is not one singular event. It stretches over a couple of months, but certainly we would like to create coherence as much as we can. But if I come back to that part, what I'm more focusing is on the sequence between the Space Summit and the ESA Ministerial Conference at the end of next year, because this should be a one logic line. And we do hope that the summit's recommendations and endorsements giving us, I would say, support also for the ESA Ministerial Conference at the end of next year, in order to then have the programs well defined, well subscribed, and I would say strongly supported by the member states.
Thank you, Josef. Thank you, Pascal. I see we have a question also from ERT, Hellenic Broadcasting Corporation. Christian, are you able to hear us? Are you able to ask your question in person? You need to unmute your microphone, Christian Mafri. Can you hear us? Christian, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
We hear you very well.
Hello, thank you very much for the opportunity. I would like to ask you the following question. You mentioned earlier that Europe has no shortage of talent, although often financial opportunities are lacking. This is especially the case for regional space centers and agencies that require funding and strongly rely on EU-funded programs and partnerships, especially in poorer countries, that's the case. How does ESA plan to support those centers and avoid further brain drain?
Okay, no, thank you. You're addressing something that is very dear to my heart, which is to foster, support, develop and give opportunities to talented young, not always young, sometimes also older people, but talented people with good ideas. And this we will have different programs and activities how we do it. We have some in place today, and I'm sure you know them well, which are the business incubation centers. We have the Phi Lab, which is today a center or an activity within ESA, but I would like to expand this also into the member states, where disruptive innovation is practiced and is put in motion with people from ESA, from the member states, but also with industry. And people can join in an open environment with their new ideas and send people there for a year, for 2 years to develop one idea, but making use of the environment which is around them. We have ACTS, as you know, the ACT program. We have the BUS program also in telecom and integrated applications, which is looking at companies, startups, innovative ideas. We have in Earth Observation Future.io, we have the NAVIS program. So there are several programs in place, but I certainly would like to strengthen them and make sure that the opportunities which we can offer are creating and supporting young talents. We will increase the funding on some of the elements that are necessary or that are, in our opinion, hopeful disciplines where space technology can further profit from. I mentioned artificial intelligence before. It's an obvious domain, but certainly not yet connected to the extent as it should be with the space disciplines. Quantum technology is another one which I would like to foster. And yes, I would like to create this network of centers where this can happen, where this can work together. Another example where I would like to offer opportunities is through this digital twin concept. And I mentioned for a moment the Digital Twin Earth Initiative, which we do for and with the European Commission, DG Connect in this case, where we are working together, and it's better known in the Commission context as Destination Earth, where we are putting together different elements of how to develop a digital twin. On one side, the observation capability through the Copernicus program and Earth observation satellites, mixed with observations on the ground and Earth system models, plus artificial intelligence, and using supercomputers in order to create digital twins where you make what-if simulations of our planet. So you can ask or simulate a question: what would happen if I change a parameter here? What is the impact on the environment, on people, on the economy, or whatever you do? And this is an element which on one side offers small companies and laboratories to participate, either through a contract which we are giving, or through their elements that they build into this infrastructure and can even sell them or can offer them to others, and or benefit through the information that is being produced. If somebody needs access to some of the data and information that is produced by this digital twin concept, then of course they can use it for their own purpose and then add value and then sell it to some customers. So yes, there will be opportunities created. There will be across the whole domain of space. And yes, I'm very committed to develop this sector.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next in line is Carl Urban. Carl, can you hear us?
Yes.
Very good. We hear you very well, Carl.
Perfect. So my question is on the relationships of the European Union and ESA. You said that you want to strengthen the relations. My question is more of a vision. So how do you see ESA related to the EU in the future? So could ESA become some kind of space agency of the EU in the far future?
Because you are asking the white elephant question. I mean, that is a question I cannot answer today, and I'm not avoiding it because I don't want to answer it. It is simply a process that is or a question that is not so easy to answer. On one side, just to recall, the ESA member states are ESA member states. They are not the same as the EU. Therefore, we are an intergovernmental organization geared and managed and driven by our member states. So they decide what we do and how we work together with the European Union. On the other side, yes, because you asked whether we could be the agency of the EU, I want to be the implementing agency of EU space programs. That doesn't mean that I'm an EU agency as ESA, but an agency that implements EU space programs. It's slightly different wording and certainly also in legal terms with a different significance. But yes, we would like to work close together to implement space programs of the European Union, but as an entity that is independent with its member states and its own rules and procedures. Of course, how this evolution goes in the future and how close we are working together and what the modalities are, this is certainly part of the evolution, but it is clear that our setup is very clearly defined as as an intergovernmental organization, which is defined by our member states.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josef. Thank you, Karl. Sabina Riedl, next in line. Sabina, can you speak? Is your microphone unmuted? Sabina Riedl?
Hi, can you hear me?
We hear you very well. Welcome.
Very well.
Perfect. Hi. Well, my question is a rather low-key question. What is it like to lead the European space agenda into the future in such dystopian times? And do you face a confrontation with various European leaders that are, showing tendencies to, disperse in various directions?
Sabina, very nice to see you, and thanks for the question. Of course, Europe, and this is the art of establishing programs in Europe, that you always have a number of different interests you have to balance out and to create a European vision and a European program. That's something that we are good at in ESA. We have been developing European programs since many decades now, 5 decades. And always, believe me, there are different interests which are going in different directions, sometimes opposite and sometimes not so opposite. But this is exactly what we need to do. ESA is built and is based on optional programs. That means we are offering activities where member states can participate if they want, but they don't have to. And that also puts a bit of pressure on us as ESA executive to make sure that our programs are so attractive that member states are willingly contributing and funding them. And yes, we will have to do the same in the next years, because if you want to also increase the ambition, of course, the interests may diverge even further, or maybe even more difficult to bring them on one line. But this is what we will have to do.
Thank you, Josef. Thank you, Sabina. I see the next question is about how Agenda 2025 affects ESA's relationship with NASA. Jeff, can you hear us? Jeff Faust? Jeff, are you able to use your microphone? I think Jeff is having some issues there. Now we hear you, I think.
All right. Sorry for the delay. My question for the Director General is, you mentioned on Twitter yesterday that you had discussed Agenda 2025 with Steve Jurczyk, the acting administrator of NASA. And I'm curious how you see Agenda 2025 affecting ESA's relationship with NASA. Will it create any sort of new opportunities or simply reinforce existing cooperation in human spaceflight, space science, and so on? Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeff. And exactly yesterday evening, I had an interaction with Steve, the acting administrator. Very cordial, very positive. Of course, at one part, it was our first get together in my new position. We did meet before, though. But also we did discuss some substance, and yes, exploration was at the core of it. So from my point of view, but as you know very well, Jeff, our decisions are made, or the decisions are supported or steered by our member states who put money into the programs or not. But certainly from my perspective, I would like to have a strong, if not a strong or strengthened relationship with NASA. We have an excellent relationship which goes back over many, many decades in many domains, of course, exploration being one of them, not the only one. And this is something I really value. It's a trusted relationship, and it's a very positive relationship for both sides where both really benefit, and that's always the best basis of collaboration, if both are really benefiting enormously from this opportunity. So I reaffirmed yesterday to Steve that I'm very, very thankful and grateful for NASA's strong partnership in working with us as ESA, and I'm more than willing and more than happy to strengthen and reinforce, or to continue to start with, but then also strengthen and reinforce this cooperation. And there's lots of opportunities on the horizon. Don't need to go into details, you would know them. But yes, I'm very positively and optimistically looking forward, also in the framework of a reinforced EU-US relationship with the new administration, as it has been expressed by both sides, that the relationship and cooperation across the Atlantic should be reinforced, and space is one domain, and I'm very happy to be part of that.
Thank you, Josef. Peter de Selding. Peter, the word is yours now. If you can unmute your microphone and we hear you.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, very well.
Good afternoon, Joseph. 3 questions that are fairly short, if I may. First one is, on page 8 of your summary, you talk about doubling the budget for game-changing technologies for in-orbit demonstration and validation. That's one of the places in the document that are few in the document actual, sort of, at least a reference to an amount. Can you double that budget without a new ministerial, or do you need a new ministerial in 2022? Second question, you say on, I think it's page 3, that you want to assess, no, page 11, that you want to assess new spaceport initiatives in Europe. Could you elaborate a little bit, I know it's early, on what your thinking is there, why you'd want to do that? And the third question is, I think you have an intermediate ministerial meeting scheduled this year. What are the principal agenda items on that? Thanks.
Okay. No, thanks, Peter. Very important questions. First one on the increase of the technology developments, and whether this needs ministerial subscriptions. Yes, the intention is to come to the next ministerial with an increased package. As I said at the introduction, the core elements of the agenda were discussed with the member states. So this is not only based on my very own writing. This is something that has been reflected and discussed, and certainly well known. Of course, the reality will be to put programs on the table and see the money subscribed, as you know perfectly well. Number 2, spaceports. Yes, as you also know perfectly well, there are some initiatives being discussed now. They are all in the very early phases. And we are open on the ESA side to see, of course, what emerges from these discussions. They are mostly driven by national agendas and national initiatives. Some of them do involve public funding from our side, some cases not. Certainly, what we will also do, and this is not exclusive or is not excluding other initiatives, is working on Kourou as our main spaceport to allow also from Kourou more flexibility for smaller satellites, smaller rockets to be launched from there. So this is an activity that is part of the competitive process, which is being supported both on the spaceport side and on the launcher side through the Boost program, but also other ones to come. And your third question on IMM, the interministerial ministers meeting. We are just shaping the meeting itself. Most likely will take place towards the end of this year in Portugal, somewhere, maybe Lisbon or maybe somewhere else. And the main elements would be to prepare the Space Summit, which is following a couple of months later, and give political guidance and input to this debate, obviously based on work we have to do before that. Until the end of the year, we have a little bit of time, but not too much, and we need to, I would say, to hurry up to get organized for both events, the IMM and the Space Summit, and obviously then these are ministerial and at the end of next year. But these 3 meetings are, there's a logic in the sequence of these 3 meetings, and they should mutually support each other. Does this answer the questions, Peter?
Yes, Peter says yes in the chat, so I think his microphone is turned off again. Thank you, Peter. I see there's another question from Eugenio Sorrentino, editor-in-chief of Orbiter. We can give you the word. Do you hear us, Eugenio?
Yes, do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you well.
Yes, very well.
Thank you for the opportunity. Good afternoon. In 30 years ago, ESA started its technology transfer program. What are the strategies that ESA will put in place in the future?
In terms of technology transfer, okay. The technology transfer program is now reshaped in a different program, but some of the activities are still there, or I'm not saying the same, but still there in an evolved form. So technology transfer, but it also has to do with call it autonomy of technologies which we want to develop. And yes, this is something that we are further developing and further supporting. It's done in the Tech Directorate in ESTEC and is part of our basic activity funding in the ministerial conference cycle.
Does that answer your question, Eugenio?
It's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I see that we are nearly at the end of our 1 hour slot. We would have time for one last question if there is. Ben, I see, Ben Upton, that you had another question that was not answered yet. Do you want to unmute your microphone and ask that second question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you very well.
So I have two questions quickly. One was, does the fact that the FFPA is still being negotiated limit what this agenda setting exercise could do? That's kind of an unknown, isn't it, in terms of the relations with the EU at least. And then the other question is slightly more specific. Thierry Breton is reportedly behind Commission proposals to exclude Swiss and UK researchers from the space aspects of the Horizon Europe program over security and economic concerns. Was ESA consulted on that decision, or do you have any kind of further comment on that? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. First part, FFPA and Agenda 2025. Yes, the two things are connected. In fact, this was discussed also with the Commission. They are connected, but also disconnected enough that they go their own path and have their own, I would say, life in terms of its preparation and implementation. Agenda 2025 obviously is the bigger vision of a very higher level vision of where we go as ESA in the next couple of years, while FFPA is, as the name indicates, the Financial Framework Partnership Agreement, which really lays out under which conditions the EU funding is used for the flagship programs Copernicus, Galileo, and some other activities. So this is more the way and the rules and procedures under which we are using this money. Of course, the two things are connected. You're absolutely right. But the Agenda 2025 is very generic, or is generic enough to leave all the freedom required for the FFPA negotiations. But certainly what it does is giving I would say, a positive spin to the negotiations to resolve some of the sticky points which we had in the past months and try to address them in a constructive manner. I don't want to say much more at this stage because the negotiations are very intense and still ongoing. But what I can say is that so far we are making very positive progress. And obviously, as I said before, we have to see at the end of it to judge what it is worth. Then Thierry Breton and UK, Switzerland, Horizon Europe. I cannot really comment on that because this is not my dossier, as you know. Whether we have been consulted, no, but also I wouldn't expect to be consulted because this is something that does concern the European Union's implementation of Horizon Europe. But certainly we have to find a modality or a mechanism, and you mentioned 2 countries. Of course, also Norway has to be added to this list. 3 countries that are not members of the EU, but members of ESA. And this certainly will be one of the important discussions which we need to have on some of the programs where we implement EU activities and EU funding, what are the rules and conditions for those countries to participate or not in these, I would say, EU-led programs. We have two examples, as you know, where we implement EU flagship programs, Copernicus and Galileo. They are very different. One is almost entirely EU funded, the other one is co-funded with ESA member states. And also the participation of those countries is different for both programs. So I think you have to see this a bit on a case-by-case basis and as part of an evolution of the debate which is ongoing.
Many thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josef, and thank you to all participants. We're now at the end of this 1-hour press briefing. Both the full ESA Agenda 2025 as well as the executive summary can now be also found on the ESA website, www.esa.int. You can both look them up there and download them there. Of course, to all of those participating to the press briefing, and now we will also send you a copy of the slides in case you have missed one or two or couldn't follow in the very beginning. And I thank you again all a lot for joining us, and most of all, a big thank you to Josef. Thank you so much and have a nice day. Thank you.